Today on Locked on Blue Jackets, Tyrer returns to talking all about the big man himself, Dmitri Voronkov, before looking into the prospect situation that the Blue Jackets have and how good it still is despite some graduating stars. That's what we're going to today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is the second part of my conversation with Tyrer. Obviously, yesterday we had a really great conversation about some of the young stars on this team. We're going to continue that today. We're talking a little bit about Dmitri Voronkov before going into the monsters, some of the standout prospects there, guys like Luca, Belluz, guys like Greaves, before going into talking a little bit about prospects that have not yet hit the Blue Jackets organization, guys to look out for in the next couple of years. And then we finish off by talking about the offseason, what the Blue Jackets do with the picks at the draft, what they should do, anyone that Dylan has his eye on, and how the Blue Jackets can have the perfect offseason right at the very end. So let's just get into my conversation with Dylan. 20 goals for Dmitri Voronkov this season. I didn't see that coming. He was a guy that I thought had to take a step forward, but I definitely didn't see him becoming one of the key. And again, he was streaky. He fell off at the end of the season, but again, 20 goals is 20 goals, right? And I didn't expect it from a guy like Voronkov.
Yeah, 20 goals is 20 goals. I would expect, he put up 18 his rookie season. So I mean, I think 25 goals is not out of the question for Dmitri Voronkov going forward. It's just going to be a matter of, keeping his body in shape to be able to keep up with the pace of the NHL, right? And I think you said it, that he faded a little bit as the season went on. He's a big guy. He's a heavy guy. It's hard, right? It's hard.
A lot of weight to drag around. Yeah.
Moving quick. But it's undeniable. He is fantastic in front of the net. He is so big in front of the net. And he speaks the same language. I'm not just talking verbally, but he speaks the same language on the ice as Kirill Marchenko. As I talked about the chemistry between Marchenko and Monahan, those guys, Marchenko and Voronkov, they know each other out there. They know where one guy's going to be. They know where the other guy's going to be, and they know how to find each other. There's something to be said for that. Do I think Dmitri Voronkov is a bona fide top 6 wing in the NHL? I don't know if I'm completely sold on that. I think he's a guy that is great on the power play and can be probably very solid on a third line. Can he keep up with the pace of being a top 6 or even a top line forward like he was this season? I don't know. I'd love for him to prove me wrong in that, but he is a good piece to have, a valuable player for the Blue Jackets. Nobody's going to mess with him when he's out on the ice either because he's such a big guy. But to say that I didn't expect that from Voronkov this year, I wouldn't go that far. Was it pleasant to see him be as successful as he was? Yes. And just like Sean Monahan is a big part of the power play, I think Voronkov is very important to that power play as well. I'd like to see him score a little bit more at 5-on-5. And be a little bit more of a factor all the time at 5-on-5, but certainly a guy that could take another step this season and really establish himself, and another guy that could establish himself as one of the more underrated players in the league.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, he needs a brand new contract, so we'll see how that.
Yeah, I got to see what the numbers look like on a potential contract for Dmitri Voronkov, because the comparables on that, it's tough, right? There aren't many guys that are that big and playing the role that he does and scoring 20 goals. So that would be an interesting deal.
Yeah, I recently did a whole episode about Voronkov, and I was like, I could see him signing short term. I could also see them locking up long term. I really have no idea which way it's going to go, which is kind of fun.
Yeah,
I feel
for
like
sure.
Don Waddell keeps things close to the chest, which is equal parts frustrating and fun, I think, when you're trying to
No,
cover the team and also be a fan of the team.
yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
I've got more of my conversation with Dylan coming up in just 1 second. But first, I will tell you all about FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. Every night is delivering highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it super easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. They've got player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. And fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you think that the Pacers are going to do the dang thing, then go to FanDuel. If you're new there, put $5 on that. And if you win, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets to add to the excitement even more. It's the perfect time to sign up. Just head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If that bet wins, $200 in bonus bets are all yours. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I want to switch to some of the prospects now, because you are the prospects guy in the Blue Jackets kind of broadcasting circle. Some guys, again, took the Monsters were better than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
They changed a lot this season, but again, it was the young guys who stepped up. Luca Belluz, I thought, was absolutely fantastic. Fell off again a little bit, as I think a lot of young players did. That seems to be a pattern that we're having here. But guys like Jet Greaves just continue to be incredible. How are the prospects with the Monsters? How are they looking? Are they proceeding kind of as we'd expect them to? Is there anyone that you are kind of eyeing as a surprise potential addition to the full-time Blue Jackets roster next season?
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Because at some point you have to make some room for guys to take that next step when they're pushing. I think they still have a few guys that they're maybe a season or two away. Like a player like Gavin Brindley comes to mind. He dealt with some injury this past season, and you'd like to see him play a full year in the AHL to see how he adjusts to the pro game and see how he fits. Maybe a surprise guy, I would say maybe a player like Luca Pinelli. I know that they've been really impressed with Luca Pinelli in Cleveland and how well he's adjusted to the pro game and just being a professional. He's a smaller guy, but plays a combative style and kind of in your face. And I think that works on the Monsters. James Malatesta plays a similar way, but I think Pinelli might have some more goal scoring touch. Luca Belluz is an intriguing one, right? Because he came into the NHL out of necessity this season when Monahan went down, and he filled in pretty nicely. Like he put up numbers in the NHL and didn't look out of place whatsoever. So he's a guy that will definitely be pushing in training camp. Like I know now that he has that taste, he's definitely going to want to give himself an opportunity to make the Blue Jackets out of training camp. Jet Greaves, I think he's got to be on the Blue Jackets next year. Jet Greaves, he was so great when he came up at the end of the season. Do I think that's sustainable for a guy like Jet Greaves to play that way like he did for a full year? No, I don't, because he was playing out of his mind. But is Jet Greaves going to fight and give you his very best every time he gets in net? Yes, he is. We've seen that now over a pretty good stretch of games in the NHL. Jet's got probably close to 20 NHL games under his belt now. And he's given the Blue Jackets a shot in what feels like all of those games. So I think what you're getting out of Jet Greaves. On the blue line, there's a little bit more uncertainty, right? Like we're going to see more of Guillaume Richard now that he's out of college. I know the Blue Jackets like him. Stanislav Svozil is another guy that they've liked for quite some time. Didn't have a huge year this past year with the Monsters, but steadily becoming a better pro. I know Corson Ceulemans has dealt with some injury. The Blue Jackets, I'm sure they'd like for him to get a full season in the AHL to see what he looks like. He's played, like I said, dealt with injury, but his first year in the AHL, he was in and out of the lineup. So they've got some pieces that of course they would like to take steps. So it's just a little bit more of a waiting game, right? Like competition is great. There's so many guys pushing for spots on that roster, the Monsters roster that I'm talking about. So, we'll see what it looks like down the road, but it's still a pretty darn good pipeline. And of course, you're going to be adding Caden Lindstrom at some point. I don't expect this year by any means, because it's out there that he's committed to Michigan State, but maybe the year after that, he's going to be in the system, and it looks like he's going to be a pretty good piece too.
Yeah, for sure. It's been interesting kind of watching the prospects. Like, again, I do a lot of, I pay attention to a lot of the prospect stuff. I know just enough about the draft to make me dangerous, stuff like that. But obviously as guys like Fantilli, Johnson, Matejchuk kind of age out of that prospect, although I think Matejchuk is still technically considered a prospect.
Yeah, he'll age out. He'll make the opening night roster this year and be aged out of being a prospect.
His job is not in doubt here, right? But
right.
It's been interesting watching guys, again, step up and look at okay, now that the big names, quote unquote, are out there, the big pieces, who's next, who's pushing. And I think, like you said, Luca Belluz, he made a case for himself, and he has, I think, again, has some real NHL potential, which is going to be really interesting when it comes to training camp, preseason. Obviously, they're probably losing a couple of pieces in the bottom six, maybe more than a couple of pieces. A lot of UFAs.
Yeah,
going to be interesting to see what happens if they go with veterans or if they give the kids a chance.
Yep. No, I agree with you. I think it's just going to come down to competition and training camp, right? I think you've got to add some veteran pieces. We saw how key veterans affected the Blue Jackets last year. You think about a player like James Van Riemsdyk and how effective he was, but Luca Belluz is pushing. Those guys have to earn their spots, and they know it. They know it. So I'm excited for camp for that reason.
Yeah, for sure. Going outside, like you obviously we talked about Caden Lindstrom joining the pipeline at some point. Do you have a prospect that's not with the organization yet that you're keep an eye on this guy?
Oh man,
that could be Lindstrom. That could be, again, someone that you've kind of watched over the year, someone new, someone that's been cooking for a while. Do you have someone that Blue Jackets fans should keep an eye out for, because he's coming?
Well, I'll give you a couple of options here. Oiva Keskinen, who signed an entry-level deal, had a pretty nice season over in Finland this past year. I'm excited to see what he looks like. I presume he's going to be over here for potentially development camp and training camp. So I'm excited to see what he looks like in person. He's I think about 5'11", 6 foot center. He's had some success playing at the international level for Finland as well. So I'm excited to see him. And then Luke Ashton. Luke Ashton is another guy I'm excited about. He's the massive 6'6" defenseman that the Blue Jackets drafted last summer in Vegas. He played his freshman season at Minnesota State and I believe transferred to Cornell. So we're going to see him, I believe, playing at Cornell this next season. But he's a good skater for how big he is. Minnesota State used him a lot this past season. I think there's some more offense in his game as well. I thought for a freshman in college hockey, it sounds like he adjusted pretty well. So I'm excited to see what sort of piece he can be. I think at development camp last year, people were impressed by Luke Ashton and kind of his toolkit. Of course, he's just so big, 6'6", 240, 45 pounds. So he's a guy that I'll have my eyes on going forward. Big defenseman.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great answer. Actually, that was not a guy that I had on my short list of potential.
There's so many you could talk about. There's so many you could talk about, but Ashton is a one that intrigues me based off of the size.
Yeah, definitely. It's that seems like the key for Don Waddell going forward is obviously he drafted a lot of prospects that know how to skate, but he also drafted some big boys. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Yep.
Obviously, the draft is coming up. It's in two-ish weeks as of the time we're recording this. Yep. Blue Jackets have 2 first-round picks. Keep them, trade them, trade one, keep one. What happens?
I mean, if you can get a good NHL player that can affect your lineup, I say trade him, right? I think the Blue Jackets are kind of approaching the mode where they would like to start opening their window, and I think to do so, they'd like to add a pretty big piece. And to add a big piece, you're going to at least need to get rid of 1, maybe 2 first-round picks. I don't know what that piece looks like, but assuming that's the caliber of player they would like to add, then that's what it's going to take. With that said, you think about all these teams that maintain their success for long periods of time, they still have guys coming through the pipeline, right? Like guys stepping into the lineup. Think about the Dallas Stars. They've had different players step in over time, whether it's a Wyatt Johnston coming in, Logan Stankoven, who I know they traded, but he was another piece that they drafted that stepped into the lineup. So you want to keep those pieces coming, right? So maybe the Blue Jackets make a pick and then trade the other one. I don't really care what they do regardless, because I think all of them are good options, right? Like maybe you trade one of the picks and get a player with the other. That's a good option. Maybe you trade both the picks and get a very good player. That's a great option. If you don't trade the picks, you draft two players that are projects going forward, right? They can help you down the road. That's another good option. So I don't necessarily mind it no matter what the Blue Jackets do here. They're in a good position. Having 2 first-round picks is great, and really the world's their oyster.
For sure. Obviously, the combine has, I believe, just finished up.
Yep, the combine's over with.
So everyone's, that they've talked to all the players that they want to talk to. Is there anyone, like any of the prospects that you kind of have your eye on as, like, I know a lot of people have kind of connected the Blue Jackets with Josh Ravensbergen, the goalie.
Yeah.
There's a handful of other guys as well that prospect guys are kind of, they always seem to end up in the same place in those mock drafts. Like, what are your thoughts on, I guess, drafting a goalie first round? Or is there anyone that you kind of have your eye on and you're like, that guy, we should take that guy?
I mean, a lot of the mock drafts have, like, guys kind of rated in that maybe like 8 to 20 range. That's where a lot of the mock drafts have, at least for the 14th overall pick, the Blue Jackets' first pick, a lot of mock drafts have guys rated in there going to the Blue Jackets, whether it's a player like Carter Bear from Everett, Logan Hensler, defenseman from Wisconsin, Jackson Smith is another defenseman, Lyndon Lakovich, he's a big left wing from the Moose Jaw Warriors, guys like that I've seen a lot. Lakovich is a guy that intrigues me. He's got a big toolkit and can play up and down the lineup. He's 6'4", he's heavy. And like I said, he can contribute in multiple ways up and down a lineup, kind of the way that we've talked about Dmitri Voronkov. I'm not saying that's a comparison by any means, but, I've said that Voronkov can play up and down a lineup, and that's what they say about Lyndon Lakovich as well. As far as it goes with Ravensbergen, the goalie, I'm intrigued by that, right? He's got a ton of size. I think the thing the experts are kind of saying about him is that maybe the numbers haven't necessarily been there for him, which makes him being a first-round pick quizzical to some. But the tools and the package look like a first-round NHL goalie. He's 6'5", he's a big guy, he can move, he's flexible. So that is a pick that really does intrigue me, a player that intrigues me. And the Blue Jackets, I think, would love to add to their goaltending pipeline. With that said, it's not like this guy's going to play right away. Goalies take quite a while. But to add to that pipeline, I think would be key. And he's a player that I wouldn't mind taking whatsoever.
Yeah, for sure. Goalies are, you can never have too many of them.
Yeah.
And also, unless you are a specific goalie expert, I feel like it's tough to really, truly evaluate, especially a prospect goalie.
Yeah. Like they're kind of crapshoots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough to figure out, is he, why is he having success? Why is he not having success?
Yeah.
Especially in the world of junior hockey, for example,
Yes.
which is famously variable, let's say.
Yeah. Yes.
Going to finish off my conversation with Dylan in just a second. First, though, I'm going to tell you all about Indeed. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday, but how can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidate faster. I've been in that spot where I needed a job like yesterday. I go to Indeed because that's the only site that I use when I'm unlucky enough to have to be job hunting. And the sponsored jobs are right there. They're right at the top of the page. Of course, I'm going to click on them because that's where the good jobs are, And that's exactly why you should go to Indeed. Speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Indeed.com/locked-on. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/locked-on right now. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. So, okay, we've talked a little bit about kind of the picks, whether they keep them, whether they trade them. If they trade them, for example, like, what's the most important thing to address in the offseason? I know that people have said, well, they need a goalie, they need defense, they need a winger, like they want to add, a scoring top 6 winger. They want to add a right-handed defenseman. Like, everyone says different things. What do you think is the most important thing? If the Blue Jackets can only add, and they can't, obviously they can add all of these things, but if they could only add one thing, what do you think is the focus?
Well, I'm going to talk about 2 things, even though you said one. But I think the number one thing is shoring up the goaltending, right? I just think that has to be better. I don't want to talk about the goaltending, though. I want to talk about adding to the top 6. And I think underratedly, I don't think a lot of people have talked about necessarily adding bite to the top 6. When you talk about adding a top 6 wing, you're thinking about adding scoring. I think the Blue Jackets could really manage or really use a player in the top 6 that can not only score, but that has some size and bite to his game. Like, you think about the Blue Jackets right now, and they've got some smaller scoring wingers. Of course, Dmitri Voronkov is a big guy. Kirill Marchenko is a bigger guy, doesn't necessarily have bite to his game, I would say. So I think the Blue Jackets could stand to add a guy that's a little bit more combative. I think if they want to be successful in the playoffs, that's what you're going to have. Look at the Stanley Cup final right now. Brad Marchand is not a big guy, but he is a combative top 6 winger. Sam Bennett is very combative, and he's a scoring forward in your top 6. I think the Blue Jackets could stand to add that. Do they really have that on the roster right now? I'm not sure. Adam Fantilli, when he was a prospect, was billed as a guy that could potentially, be a combative style player. Have we seen that in the NHL yet? No. Could the Blue Jackets stand to add somebody like that? Yes, I think they could. And I think that is a very, very underrated piece that I would like to see them add that would go a long way.
Yeah, Brad Marchand's a really interesting name because I feel like you say his name and everyone immediately is like, "Oh God, no!" And then
I love Brad Marchand. I would welcome him.
Everyone would have him on their team.
Come to town. Come on down, Brad Marchand.
I think, Bennett, is almost certainly going to resign in Florida, but Brad Marchand is a really interesting name.
This whole free agency is very interesting because everybody has more money now with the cap going up. So I have no idea what these deals are going to look like. I have no idea where any of these guys are going to go. But to me, I would love to see the Blue Jackets add a combative top 6 forward with some size.
Yeah, for sure. Last question. Obviously, the Blue Jackets were 2 points away from the playoffs this season, which is just so close. You hate it, right?
Yep.
How do they not fall short next season? How do they make sure that they are maybe not even in the playoffs, but how do they make sure that they're not on the outside looking in and having to hope that everything else goes their way? Because I feel like they kind of took destiny out of their own hands.
So, so what you're saying is, how can the Blue Jackets control their own destiny next year?
Correct. Yeah.
I think it's a combination of a lot of the things we talked about, right? Like, you need better goaltending. That is the number one thing that they're just going to need some better goaltending next year. You need to get a save to win some of these games. The power play, the special teams, I think are a big part of that too. They need more goals from the power play. Their penalty kill also needs to be better. With all of this said, if these guys continue to take steps and become the players they were projected to be in the NHL, the Kent Johnsons of the world, Adam Fantilli, Denton Mateychuk, if all of these guys are able to continue to progress, it's not linear, right? Progression is never linear. There's going to be ups and downs. I expect to see more of them next year. But as a whole, if this team can continue to progress and those young pieces get better, I think the Blue Jackets will be in a pretty good spot. I think next year, if I had to project, I think they will be in a similar position, battling for a playoff spot. But this year, they let it slip out of their hands. They did control their destiny for a point, or for a period of time, I mean. And then they let it slip away. This year, they have that experience under their belt. So a combination of all these things, and I think the Blue Jackets will be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, the goal is to not get shut out 6 times in the month of March, I think is potentially
there are
key,
some
right?
interesting circumstances that happened that took destiny out of their hands. But If they can play a little bit more consistent hockey, they'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Dylan, thanks for coming to chat about all things Blue Jackets, for catching us up on how the prospects are doing. I know that you do a lot of like in-season prospect stuff like that. Where can people find that? Where can they find you online?
Yeah, you can follow me on socials at Dylan Tyrer, DYLANTYRER. We've got a couple editions of the Pipeline podcast presented by Ruoff Mortgage out to get you ready for the NHL draft. So if you want to hear from the experts, I've got interviews with Scott Wheeler and Chris Peters lined up, a couple of prospect experts that will really tell you all you need to know coming into this year's draft. And other than that, you can just find all of our work on Blue Jackets socials or at bluejackets.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan.
All right. Thank you, Jay. This was great.
And that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow is Sunday, so no episode then. Monday, we will do the Sam Bennett episode that I promised that I would do last week. And we'll talk about his potential Conn Smythe winning performance, because it certainly seems like it might be going that way. But that's Monday's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Hit subscribe, hit like, etc., etc. I'm on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. The podcast is over on Blue Sky at LO-Blue Jacket. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, until Monday, make sure you stay locked on.